Are you ready to upcycle and create something beautiful? Let's craft these enchanting seaside wind chimes using household materials and polymer clay. Hey there, Sandy here with another polymer clay tutorial at keepsakecrafts.net. There are four main parts of a set of wind chimes, not including the string that we use to hang them. Of course, very importantly are the tubes. We are not going to be making these out of polymer clay. You could definitely wrap dowels with polymer clay and make tubes, but they're not going to have the same pleasant sound that you would get from metal. You can purchase these on Amazon. I've seen them at Fire Mountain Gems. A lot of websites have sets of tubes. This is a really inexpensive set I got from Amazon. For under $10, there are enough tubes in here to make anywhere from 6 to 12 wind chimes. Maybe you just want to refurbish an old set that you found. This was a set that I found and I took apart, and I'm going to use the tubes to make our chimes today. There's also the support plate, or I've heard it called the top plate or the hanger plate. It's basically the part at the top that everything hangs from, and it's the part we're going to decorate the most today. There's also the striker, which is what hits the tubes and makes the sound, and there's the sail, which is what catches the wind, hence the name sail. It catches the wind, it hangs below the striker, so when it moves, the striker moves and hits the chimes and makes them sound pretty. Anything goes when it comes to the support plate. It can be as simple as a flat disc or a metal ring, or you can use an object like a wooden birdhouse or a metal lantern. If you can drill holes in it, hang things from it, you can use it. For this project, I'm going to show you how to recycle a metal can and cover it with polymer clay decorations for the support plate. This is just a cat food can, a tuna fish can, anything of the sort. Now in this project, you can make the holes at any point. You're going to need three kinds of holes. You're going to need holes for the hanger, a hole for the striker and sail to dangle from, and holes for the tubes to hang from. You can make it at any point, but I have found that it works best to make them before you add the final layer of clay. So in this case, here's one. I've already added one layer of clay, and I've started adding my holes. They are imperfect, as you can see, and it will be just fine. But let's start by covering our can with clay. Because it has a lot of shape and divots and such to it, I am going to add a layer of clay, and then I'm going to add my decorative layer over it, just so that it's a little bit smoother in appearance. For my base layer of clay, I have this rolled out on the thickest setting of my pasta machine. You could use scrap clay here. This is just some that I have a lot of, and it's not a color I love. So first, cut a layer that will cover the top of your, or bottom of your can, the top of your support plate. And you know, I tried doing this with a very thin layer of clay, and I found the only benefit to doing it that way was that you use less clay. When you use the thicker clay, it's easier to add, it's easier to smooth out, and it comes out looking nicer. So the only benefit was saving clay. I felt like I definitely wanted it to look nicer and be smoother. So I started by cutting that out. Now I'm going to roll a strip, and that will be enough to wrap around the can. Okay, here's my strip. So I'll just line it up. I'm not being perfectly neat here. I want it to be smooth, but this is going to be a base layer. There we go. I just have to patch that in a little. Oh, use the sharp side, Sandy. It'll be fine. Trim off that excess. Now I'm going to make molded decorations for my piece because it's quick and easy, but you can sculpt things if you want. You could use slices of cane, so you could cover this with maybe a repeating pattern of cane. If you had some kaleidoscope cane, that would look very nice. You could even forego polymer clay entirely and use something like epoxy clay and embed things in it. If you want to know more about epoxy clay, I did a video on that a while back. I will link to it, but it's basically a glue that is in a clay form, and it dries rock hard, and it is marine grade. They use it on boats. So you could instead of sculpting seashells like I'm going to do, you could embed real seashells, bits of glass, stones, broken jewelry. Anything you want that will hold up to the weather, you can embed in the epoxy clay, and when it's cured and dried, it will be in there forever. Now, this part you may need to adjust depending on the kind of can you have. This, like I said, is a cat food can. It's one of those pull tabs, and so it's got this kind of sharp lip here. So I want to cover that so it doesn't cut into my cord and nobody handling it gets cut. And you just take some of your clay and roll it into a log that's about, maybe just under 1/2 inch in diameter. And I'm going to press this onto that sharp edge. So if your can is configured differently, you might have to do it a little bit differently, but I'll show you what I mean. If I press this, you can see that. So I'm just going to put this around that, just as protection and to finish it off cleanly. I mean, if you really wanted a clean finish, you could paint the inside. You might even just spray paint it before you add clay. That would be easy. So once you add it all around, then you can take a little time and just smooth out these joins. Add your circle that you cut out to your top. And this is where it's so helpful that you rolled a nice thick sheet of clay, because you have plenty here to roll up over the edge and smooth out. Once that's done, you will have something like this. I have already started some holes and markings on here. So these are the tools you'll need to make your holes. You'll need a hammer, a surface to hammer into, and an awl. And of course something to mark with. Now the first thing I did, and I didn't do it very well, so I might redo that 4th one. That's the one that looks like it's askew. Is I just took a square cutter that fit inside and then marked the 4 corners, and this will be where we hang it from top. There's kind of a clever little trick for hanging it from the top. Actually, I wanted to start that on the inside, not the outside. Okay. This is a little tricky, and I suppose that's why that one got off. Okay. So I was concerned about hammering straight through the baked clay, that it would crack. It hasn't so far, but this is why I suggest that you mark your holes and get them started before you add your final layer of clay, just so that nothing is going to crack. So that should be, yeah, right about there. So you just put your awl where you want the hole to be. Take your hammer and give it a couple good whacks. That's more like it. Then you'll need a drill bit. This is a 1/16 inch drill bit. Just drill through that clay, and you can also drill into the metal. And this is going to clean up that hole, especially going from the inside. There's no sharp edges, and then once I add that final layer of clay, there won't be any sharp edges to cut into our cord. Next, you want to find the center and mark that as well. The center hole is the one we will use for hanging the striker and sail. Now you could hang everything from this hole if you want, but I just liked the way the cording looked. I'll show you when you use these 4 holes. I just thought it looked kind of interesting. The next thing you'll need to mark is the spacing for your tubes, your chime tubes, and this depends on how many chime tubes you have. This one uses 7. I've included in the PDF that comes with this class printouts of 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 pointed stars. This can be a little tricky because, as I showed you, you want to punch through the metal towards the outside so that you get a clean hole. But of course it's easy to mark it from the outside. So what you can do is first mark the bottom right here. Remember, we're going to cover this with more clay. So if you just, I'm standing up so I can look right down over it, and I can mark all these points. And you know, they don't have to be absolutely perfect. I think it's nice. That's pretty good. Now I can just transfer the markings to the inside. Like this. If these marks inside the can bother you, you can paint it, or you can just use some rubbing alcohol and wipe them away. And then next you'll need to stand your can up on end. And like I said, it's a little awkward, but get your awl right on that spot. And then smack away. And repeat until you have all of your holes marked and drilled. Have I mentioned that the sky is the limit as far as decorations for this? Truly. But here's what I did. I chose some colors that I liked and made a blend. And I made sure to keep the blend just a little bit wider than the side. So enough to wrap around the inside and then enough to go over the top edge. And you can do that by using a wooden dowel spacer in your pasta machine. I'll link to a video where I've shown you how you can do this. Or you can just throw blocks of clay in your pasta machine that will keep this narrow. But now that I have it covered with just some scrap clay or clay that isn't going to show, I can roll this nice and thin so you don't have to use a lot of your nicer clay to cover it. I'm just finishing up adding a layer of liquid clay all over this baked clay. Just a thin coating. It will help your unbaked clay stick and also prevent air bubbles. So you can line that up however you want. Now, alternatively, if you don't want to add quite as much clay, you could use a color that you like and then just add a strip around the top. In fact, I did something similar to that in a video I did for Create Along. I used a paperclip cup, one of those metal paperclip cups like you get at the dollar store for the top plate, and just put a strip of polymer around it. And that worked out really well. I have 2 of those. They've been in my garden for over a year and they look great. Now here, where you're wrapping this around, be careful that you don't wrap it so much that it covers up the holes you made. You can, of course, go back and trim it, but it's easier to just not cover up your holes to begin with. So start by getting as many of the bubbles out of the side as you can. So just roll them so they come out. That one's not coming out. Pierce it. Don't worry about making this smooth unless you want it smooth, but I'm going to add a texture to mine. It really makes your life a little bit easier. So I think there's a little too much clay in there, so you can come in with your roller and just roll that. And it looks like I'm going to need a little bit more of my clay here at the top. So I've got another piece here, and here's a fun little trick. Now, I could have made life easier for myself and just had a separate color on top, but I had it in my mind. I wanted the blend to go all the way to the top, and that could be tricky because it has all those folds, as you see. So what you can do is, first of all, make sure you put your piece on some paper so you're not trying to peel it up off your work surface because that'll wreck that edge you made. Put another piece of paper on top and grab a burnisher. This is a doorknob that I got at the hardware store, Home Depot. And you can use this to really go in and smooth the whole thing out completely. Again, it's best if you do it from the center out. If you're loving this tutorial and you'd like to help me create even more awesome content, consider becoming a patron. You'll get exclusive benefits and help keep these projects coming for everyone. Thank you so much for all of your support. Of course, I need to go in and smooth this out even more, but once you have it fairly smooth and even, you can texture it. And you're going to need 2 textures because this is round and you have no way of holding it. So you just lay it on one texture. I mean, you can use the same one. I just happen to have 2 different ones. This is a soap saver that I got at Walmart. It has just a great texture. And this is a piece of aquarium sponge. But use your favorite texture tools and go over the whole thing and get it nice and smooth, chasing out air bubbles and all that. So you'll want to bake that for probably 45 minutes so it's nice and strong. And then what you'll need to do is go in again and find those holes that you made and drill out the outer part of the clay. So go ahead and drill all 4 or all 5 on top and however many chimes holes you need around the sides. Just get those all drilled out and nice and cleaned out. I have now drilled out all of the holes, and I've made sure, especially these holes for hanging the chimes, are clearly visible from the outside. You probably wondered why I didn't add my decoration first, and this is why. I'm using molded shapes. So like I've got this thick little turtle, and what I don't want to do is accidentally put him where a hole needs to be, because then it would just be awkward and thick. So that is why. Now here's my color palette that I chose for this project, by the way. I have a color inspiration Pinterest board, and I went on and found this photo that made me just very happy, summertime and beach themes. And so I mixed up this array of colors inspired by that palette. So my base was these 3 shades of blue and green, and I'm going to make all of my decorations with this yellow, orange, and pearl. All of these colors have some pearl mixed into them, which is one reason they are harmonious. And as I keep saying, you can make this any theme you want, but I'm doing summer and beach. So I have here some molds that I made. If you want to learn how to make your own molds out of silicone molding putty, I'll link to a video I made on that. These are all seashells. These ones are actually 2-part molds, which we don't need for this project. We don't need the other part. But if you want to learn how to make those, make a 3-dimensional object that you could mold, I'll link to that one as well. But I just have some shells. This is just a little charm that's a castle, but it always makes me think of a sand castle. And this is Sculpey's Sea Life mold, which has some really adorable pieces in it. Here are some I've already molded for this project. This is helpful because then you can just pull them off and put them wherever you want. And I'm kind of doing blends, like subtle marbled blends of these 3 colors. So grab a little bit of the colors you want, and then roll them out into a log and start twisting. Just twist, 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 twist. And fold it on itself and twist some more. And if you think that's what you're going to like, the way you can test it is to roll it into a ball. Do you like that marbling? Well, I don't. It definitely needs to be more subtle for me. I think I want to add a little bit of the pearl to this one too. Just roll them into logs. Twist, mix, twist. Now it still needs to be more. Twist, twist, twist. It looks like that might be getting there. Roll it into a ball. Yeah. Now the keys to getting successful molded pieces are 2. First of all, start with a smooth ball. And that is way too much clay, so we're going to pinch off a good deal. And the second key is to underfill rather than overfill. So I'll do this little scallop shell. You just press it in there. Now that is still overfilled. So I'm going to pull it out, pull off a chunk, maybe even a 1/4 of it. Smooth ball. There. Now when I press it in, it is slightly, I don't know how well you can tell on camera, but it is slightly underfilled. I'm pressing it in firmly, and then I'm using the edge of a thumb or a finger, can you see that shadow line, to pull it back from the edges. And that way you don't have to trim off any excess clay. And these silicone molds are great. You can just push from the other side, pop it out. And it's funny, even though you underfilled it, there seems to always be this little edge that you just have to take your fingers and stroke to the other side. And you do that with any of them. Grab my liquid clay again and just start placing these all around, making sure I don't block up any of my hanging holes. I rolled the dolphin and the seahorse in order to go on the sail, and I'll show you that in a minute. So you just, because this is textured, I'm putting I don't know, maybe not that much, but a good amount of liquid clay on there so they're not going to pop off. And oh, you know what? I want to cover that seam in the back. I think we'll make him swimming down. Oh, that's cute. Carry on adding new decorations all around. Well, that's kind of cute. Now you may find that because you're putting flat objects on a round object that they don't want to stick. But if you add plenty of liquid clay and then just let it sit for a few minutes, you can go back and tap down any of those edges that have lifted. And generally the liquid clay gets kind of tacky as it sits, and so they should stick down for you, just with some gentle pats. And once you have everything in place the way you want it, go ahead and give this a bake for an hour. Also double check before you bake that you didn't cover up any of your holes. What, do I have a hole over here? Is that it? Whoops, that's pretty close, huh? I should probably move that. There. The striker is usually a simple disc with a hole drilled through the center. It can be metal, wood, and it can even be polymer clay, which is what we're going to make with ours. This is rolled out to about 2 millimeters thick. This is just some of my leftover blues and greens, kind of marbled. And that's that. You can clean up your edges now. You can sand them after baking. And I'm going to wait to drill my hole until after I'm done baking so I can do a nice, neat job of it. The sail is what catches the wind, so you want to make sure that it has enough surface area to do just that. But other than that, you can make it any size or shape you like. Again, for this project, we'll make ours out of polymer. I came across this seashell-shaped cutter, which I thought was cute, but it's a little big for this project. You could just make it round, you could do a freeform shape, a star, a heart. I happen to have this teardrop that I kind of like. Again, just some of my leftovers, sort of marbled. The sail, again, can be any material, metal, wood, plastic. I'll just kind of clean up those edges. And I'm going to get cute and add a dolphin on one side and a seahorse on the other, just because I want to. You don't have to. It can just be a plain shape, but, you know, I thought he was kind of adorable. And I will drill the hole for this one also once it is baked, so I can make it nice and neat and not distort my shape. So this, where I have a shape on each side, I will probably want to put on a bed of fiberfill to bake. I think I'm going to curl his tail in a little. And now this is ready to bake along with your striker and your top. I would bake them for at least an hour so that they're nice and strong. Now that my pieces are out of the oven, I am ready to drill a couple holes and string my wind chimes together. I think this came out really cute. By the way, I don't think I mentioned the size of this piece. This is a 2.5-inch diameter circle, and it is specific to the wind chimes. You want the striker to be the right size. So if you look at the diameter of your support plate, and then consider where your chimes are going to hang, you want there to be somewhere between 1/2 inch and 1 inch between the striker edge and the tubes. Now, if you want to get really deeply into designing custom wind chimes, I will send you to a website that will help you do just that. He has got charts and calculators. It is an incredible resource. I never knew how much science and physics could be involved in the making of wind chimes. But anyways, here's my striker, and this is a different one from the one you saw me make. I just did a thick layer of pearl, and I had some leftover blend and put some on either side. Not very well, there's bubbles, but that's okay. It'll still work fine as a striker. I marked my center, started it with an awl, just a little hole so that my drill bit won't move on me, and just drill that out. And the same for my sail. Just gonna mark, don't mark too close to the tip. Give yourself a little space. Maybe do it in the center. There. And drill out that hole as well. You can sand this. This one was a tricky one to keep flat because I have the lumpy shapes on either side. There's a video I made of wind chimes that's on Create Along's YouTube channel, and on there I actually used a laser cut wooden piece and then put polymer on it for the sail, and that worked very nicely. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is string our tubes, because the distance between the striker and the sail and the top of our plate kind of all depend on where the tubes fall. You can use all sorts of things for material, for stringing material. I'm going to use some jewelry wire because I have it, and this is a color I don't think I will ever use in making a piece of jewelry. But you can use cording, you can use other wire, and you might have to do just a little practicing to figure out how long you need your pieces to be. So I'm going to do this like a piece of jewelry with wire and crimps. I figured out for my tubes, I want them, this piece of wire needs to be about 8 inches long. I'm going to string a wire into one of the holes. Then I'm going to slide a crimp tube, or crimp bead, doesn't matter, on the side towards the inside of the can. And then on the other side, I'm going to add one of my chime tubes. And it's up to you what order you put these in. I think they look pretty, like all in descending order. And you probably want to measure so you can get all the tops of the tubes lined up. I deliberately started in the hole that my holes aren't all at the same distance from the edge because I have this thickness of clay in here. So I started at the one furthest from the edge. So that one will use the most wire. And then I'll just find that crimp, slide the other wire up into it. Gonna get those ends together. And what I'll do is I'll just put my ruler here. I'll have the top of my tube about 1.5 inches from the bottom of the support plate. And all you need to do is grab some chain nose pliers and give a good squeeze. And there we go. That's about 1.5 inches from the bottom. Here I've just added the second one, just kind of comparing the two of them, making sure they're about the same distance. And if you get it way off, you can always just try again, cut out another piece of wire, and carry on adding your tubes all the way around. Got all my tubes strung. So the next thing we're going to do is add a hanging loop. I just really like the way this looks, the way it's done, which is why I had you drill the 4 holes in the top. So that's what we're going to use. You'll need about a 20-inch piece of your stringing material. So I'm just going to have to shove all these tubes out of the way. And of course you could just use cord and tie a knot, and you just tuck the knot or the crimp right up under on the inside, and it should stay there because of the weight of the tubes hanging on it. So your 20-inch piece goes in from the inside and then into, and I know this is awkward, an adjacent hole from the outside into another adjacent hole on the inside, from the inside, and then finally back through that last hole. So what you should have are 2 parallel lines on the top and on the inside. And next you can grab yourself another crimp or tie a knot in the 2 ends. And in this case I am going to feed these wire ends. So they're in opposite directions, so it'll make a flat area. And then just have some wire going out past it on either side, or maybe 1/2 inch, it's not crucial. And flatten that with your chain nose pliers, nice and tight. Give it a tug, make sure it's not going to come apart, and you can trim that excess wire. And this is the cool part. So now flip it over. Grab those 2 wires and pull, and there you go. They kind of automatically center. and you can put a big whole bead on there if you want for a little decoration. And what's cool is because it makes a triangle, you don't need to put any stoppers on the bead. And then you can put any kind of S-hook you want up here to hang it from. So I happen to have this one just hanging around. You can make one out of some wire. You could add just like a keychain ring. There we go. So now the hanger is ready. And one final thing, or two final things, our sail and striker. So find the longest tube. Measure the distance. It looks like I need a longer ruler. Measure the distance from the bottom of your top plate. So, okay, we got 12 inches to here, 13.5 inches. You want your sail to land pretty close to the bottom of your longest tube. This will give you maximum movement of the striker. You don't want it way, way down. Yeah, here where you can't see it, but you don't want it way down because it'll make the striker move less. Unless you have wind chimes that you find annoying and you wish they would strike less, then that's fine. So I'm going to cut a piece of stringing wire, double that length plus a little, about 30 inches long, just to give myself some room to play. Well, that worked out well, as I had about 36 inches left on this spool. So now we're going to go through our sail, and then just to keep it centered, and a little bit of decoration, it's nice to add some beads here. Bring this down to the center of your wire and then add whatever beads you want for decoration. If you want, you can just put a crimp there to hold it in place. Just make sure it moves, don't bind it in place. There, I did add a crimp here just to keep the bead from sliding down too far and binding up. Now, the important thing that this website with all the technical stuff, did you know you can cut the tubes and get a scale? Like you can cut them at certain lengths and get a chord or a pentatonic scale. We're not doing that today. I might try it sometime, and you can go to that website and read all about it. It's pretty cool. But anyways, that was where I got the information about not having your sail too far down away from your chimes. And another thing about the striker was that you don't want it hitting dead center in any of your tubes, or it's just going to be a dead sound. So it needs to be either above or below center. So this is probably best done with the chimes hanging. Just hang them straight up, use your ruler, and determine where you want the striker to fall on the chimes. What was recommended was that you have your striker right above just the bottom of the shortest tube. So right here I have my shortest and my longest ones. So I want my sail coming just below that shortest one, longest one. And then up here I want it just above the shortest one. Make sure those are lined up at the top. Make sure that's where I want it. And then I'll just make a little mark. I'm also going to add some beads above and below the striker. So I will add a crimp about a bead's width below that mark that I made. Flatten that. And now you can slide on beads, your striker, and another bead. You can add, I mean, you could fill the whole strand with beads if you wanted to. You can do whatever you want here. Here we go. And then another bead and another crimp on top of that. All right, we are nearly done. Now it's just a matter of positioning this in that center hole. So you got to find the point where you want to put another crimp and a bead as a stop so it won't go up any further. And again, I've got my shortest and my longest. This wire is springy, so it's a little tricky, so I'm just going to put a little tension on it there. Now I am pinching this on this side. I'm going to pinch this wire, and I know where I want it to be. And I'm going to hold that, and I'm going to measure, because this wire is being springy. I'm going to measure where I want, so at about 8.5 inches. I'm going to pull this back out of the top and add a crimp and another bead. And this bead can be something you don't like because it's going to be on the inside of the jar. You're not going to see it. 8.5 inches, right about there. Make sure those wires are straight. And now we can send these wires back up through the center. Add another bead if you like for decoration and a crimp. Once you add this final bead and crimp on top, just make sure to hang up your chimes and be certain you're happy with the way they're hanging and everything is good. And once you know it's secure, you can trim off that excess wire. What I love about this 4-wire, or however you want to call it, hanging method is that it's self-leveling. So even if you don't get things perfectly in the center, you can just shift it a little and it will be centered. Now you know how to make wind chimes, but if you need even more tips and projects, you should dive into my polymer clay sculpting playlist.